Welcome back to The Explainer. We're jumping right into something absolutely crucial today. We are unpacking the Nye County School Transportation, Counterterrorism, and Security Guide. Now, I know what you might be thinking. When we say counterterrorism, your mind probably goes straight to crowded city centers, right? Maybe a bustling international airport. But what makes this guide so uniquely fascinating is that it tackles a completely different beast, the massive, isolated, rural stretches of Nevada. It's a whole different ballgame out there. The guide actually hits us right off the bat with this stark reality check. Terrorists rarely act without planning. We kind of have this movie version idea that attacks are these spontaneous explosions of violence that just come out of absolutely nowhere. But actually, no. They are methodical, they are heavily planned, and you know what? Because they're planned, they can be spotted. Let that sink in for a second. Your vigilance isn't just some corporate buzzword here, it's literally a tactical defensive tool. So let me pose a question to you. Would you know how to spot an attack before it happens on an isolated desert highway? Really picture this. Put yourself right in the driver's seat of a massive school bus, navigating the vast, empty routes between Pahrump, Tonopah, Amargosa Valley, and Beatty. You are out there, miles from anyone else, completely responsible for the safety of dozens of kids. So what exactly are you supposed to be looking for in all that empty space? Well, that brings us to what the guide calls the rural route reality. In Nye County, which is the largest county in Nevada, by the way, the distances are just vast and the stops are deeply isolated. Because law enforcement is naturally miles away, response times can take a while on those sprawling highways. Noticing the early indicators of a plot? That's not just an extra precaution. It is a driver's absolute primary defense. Out there, you're the first and sometimes the only line of security. All right, let's break this down chronologically. Phase 1, gathering intelligence. How plots begin in the shadows. Okay, so to get information, operatives actually have to expose themselves just a bit. This leads us to the first of the 8 signs, which is surveillance. Adversaries have to watch their targets to find vulnerabilities and map out your daily routines. So if you see someone repeatedly photographing the buses, maybe tracing the transit routes in their own cars, or filming the Pahrump or Tonopah bus yards, man, that is a massive red flag. They are gathering the visual data they need to build their operational plan. Moving right along to sign number 2, elicitation. This is where operatives step out of the shadows just enough to extract specific operational details from completely unsuspecting people. We're talking about strangers asking highly unusual or just oddly specific questions about school schedules, security protocols, or driver shifts. You see, they aren't just making friendly conversation, they are actively probing for your weak spots. The guide makes a brilliant distinction here to help clear this up. Asking, hey, what time does the bus usually arrive? That's just harmless small talk. A parent or a local resident might ask that every day. But something like, how many guards work the night shift at the bus yard? Okay, wait a minute. That completely crosses the line. That is elicitation. Recognizing that subtle shift from everyday curiosity to targeted intelligence gathering is an absolutely essential skill when you're out on the route. That brings us to the third sign, which is tests of security. This is where the planning gets physical. Terrorists will actually physically test your defenses to see exactly how quickly Nye County personnel or local law enforcement respond to an anomaly. This might look like unauthorized people trying to push past a gate into the yard, or deliberately leaving a suspicious item, say a random empty backpack, near a rural bus stop just to sit back with a stopwatch and see how long it takes for someone to react. It's like a twisted dress rehearsal. So what comes next? Phase 2, resource acquisition. Gathering the tools for the attack. Now that they have the intelligence they need the tools. Sign number 4 is funding. Terror plots need money to happen. On a local level, this can reveal itself through unusually large cash transactions for surplus equipment. But it's not just about money, actually. It's also about the theft of official property. If official school district uniforms or vehicle decals suddenly go missing, that's a major indicator that a plot is being financed or resourced through illicit means. Once they're funded, we hit sign 5, acquiring supplies. Plotters buy or steal the specific supplies needed to bypass your security. Obviously, this means amassing weapons, but it also means acquiring vehicles, uniform pieces, or credentials. Think about it. In rural school districts, a retired or surplus school bus is surprisingly easy to buy. And in the wrong hands, a vehicle like that becomes a devastating tool. And that perfectly sets up sign 6, impersonation. Operatives will use those acquired uniforms to blend right in at remote desert stops and attempt to bypass security perimeters. If you see individuals pretending to be utility workers, mechanics, or school officials who just don't look right, or who suddenly lack proper district ID when you challenge them, watch out. They might be using stolen or forged supplies to gain access to a critical staging area. Now, what I found super fascinating in the guide is how this applies directly to the local environment. Because Nye County has a really high volume of commercial transit, criminals often use cloned vehicles. So here is exactly what drivers should be looking for. Watch for misspelled school district names on the side of a bus. Look for missing or poorly matched license plates, excessive decals awkwardly slapped over old logos, or fleet service numbers that just don't fit the standard format. A cloned vehicle is basically a wolf in sheep's clothing, specifically designed to bypass the gate. All right, moving into the critical stage, Phase 3, the final countdown, moving from preparation to execution. At this point, the window to actually stop the attack is closing fast. Sign 7 is rehearsal. Terrorists don't just wing it, remember? They meticulously practice the attack. They conduct dry runs of the routes to ensure their timing is absolutely perfect. So you might spot individuals literally timing bus stops, pacing out distances, or using scanners to monitor police radio channels. They're doing this to work out any fatal flaws in their plan before the real thing happens. And finally, we reach sign 8, deployment. This is the crucial, critical, final phase where operatives are actively moving into position, or worse, the attack is actually underway. At this stage, the pre-planning is completely over. The threat is immediate, it is physical, and your intervention must be absolutely immediate. Which brings us to the most important part of the explainer, responding to the threat. Action protocols on the rural route. So what do you do when a threat is right in front of you? The absolute most crucial point is this number right here, 300 feet, or about 91 meters. If you spot a suspicious package, you must establish an electronic exclusion zone of at least 300 feet. That means absolutely no two-way radios, no cell phones, literally no electronics until you are well past this boundary. Why? Because those invisible electronic signals can accidentally detonate certain improvised explosive devices. It is, quite literally, a matter of life and death. And the guide provides this incredibly sobering breakdown of evacuation distances based on what you're looking at. Notice how drastically the perimeter expands based on the container size. For a small pipe bomb, one holding about 5 pounds of explosives, the mandatory evacuation distance is 70 feet. But look at the bottom row. A cloned semi-trailer, that could hold 60,000 pounds of explosives. Your mandatory evacuation distance leaps to over 1,500 feet. You have to quickly assess the size of the container to know exactly how far back to push your perimeter. To make this completely actionable for you, here is your systematic 4-step emergency response protocol. Step 1, do not approach or touch the item. Just don't do it. Step 2, enforce that electronic silence up to the 300-foot mark we just talked about. Step 3, evacuate safely. Move everyone back and try to use natural barriers like buildings or hills for shielding if you can. And finally, step 4, only once you are safely outside that electronic exclusion zone, report immediately by calling 911. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? From the subtle shadows of surveillance all the way up to the urgent realities of evacuation distances. So, I want to leave you with this final thought. Now that you know these 8 signs, how will your daily commute look different tomorrow? Are you going to notice that car parked just a little too long near the rural staging area? Will you look twice at the weird decals on a passing utility truck? Remember, in the vastness of the rural route, your trained observation is the ultimate defense. Stay sharp out there, and thanks so much for joining me on The Explainer.